Hi everyone. Today's review is going to be of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. This movie was suggested to me by my friend and subscriber, Quite Davis, who also has his own channel. You should check it out. He also suggested me to review the SpongeBob movie, which was my last review. So thank you for that and this one. So this movie is going to be a little harder to talk about than, say, the Disney classics or the Pixar movies. Certain movies you really have to see at a certain age, and this one I did not. I was around 6 or about to be, depending on what month it came out, when this movie was released, and it didn't look that appealing. I was more interested in Monsters, Inc. and Shrek when they came out, really. So, I didn't grow up with this movie. And I didn't really get into the Jimmy Neutron show, the few episodes I did see. I saw a couple, they were alright, but nothing really spectacular. Be that as it may, I'm going to do my best to give this movie a very fair review. Now, let's start with the story. Jimmy Neutron, a boy genius, is trying to reach outer space and also getting around his parents' rules about no talking to strangers, no sneaking out at night, all the typical parent cliche lines that are given. But then it turns out the aliens are hunting for humans, and they abduct all the parents, and after a while, Jimmy and his friends realize that without parents, they have a serious problem and that they need to go find and save their parents. So they go to outer space and try to rescue them from King Booba and his fellow Yogians from being sacrifices to their god Ultra. Yeah, there are some problems with this movie and lines of story. One, the Jimmy Neutron show came out a year after this, so I think it's hard not to say that this is a pilot, basically, that was released to theaters. But, as pilots go, there are things to be enjoyed. There is a definite level of creativity with the world and some of the interactions with Jimmy and his gadgets, or some of the alien world concepts really are interesting, but at the same time, there's a lot of cliches here too. The biggest one being the message of your parents want what's best for you, and you need to follow the rules and listen to them. It is a good message, I'll grant you that. But there's so many other animated films that have that sort of message. Pinocchio being a great example. And 60 years before this film was released, that film was far more subtle with it. So, it's hard to say that this film really has its message done right. It's hit on the head so much by the characters, and it doesn't feel like they can just let it flow naturally or get the kids to think about it. But like I said, there are creative aspects to the world, which we'll get into more for the animation. The animation for this movie is very basic, even for the early 2000s. People were surprised that this was one of the 3 Oscar nominees for animated film, along with Shrek and Monsters, Inc. for being the first ones. And yeah, sure, this clearly didn't have the same budget, and Paramount and Nickelodeon don't have all the resources that Pixar and DreamWorks have, I'm sure. But even compared to movies from this time, this really feels like TV animation. The characters are often awkward looking, especially the humans. Objects even look strange, from eggs to plants to anything in the house. It's generic in some bits and awkward in others. But at the same time, like the movie story, there are aspects of creativity. Some of the designs have, some of the devices are interesting, and I do like the way King Koopa and the other aliens look. It's nothing spectacular or well rendered, but there is a definite level of imagination there. The world they live in, though, the planet, other than some egg designs, is rather disappointing. They could have had a little more creativity there, I think. But again, early 2000s movie, Nickelodeon, clearly trying to market an upcoming show, so I'm not going to fault them too much for that. The animation isn't terrible. It's not painful to look at, but it's awkward and it's nothing really special to look at, which is sometimes pretty frustrating in another way. On to the characters. So we have our lead, Jimmy, and he is a genius kid, but at the same time doesn't seem to understand his parents want what's best for him. He still has the same problems as other kids, being short, and while he is very smart and intellectual and able to design all these things, he still doesn't understand what's really best for him, which really helps drive the message of the movie. Honestly, if they didn't constantly bring it up and they just had it through Jimmy's perspective, that he was realizing it slowly over the movie, maybe, and then had his little spiel at the end about how he was wrong about not needing his parents, then this might have made the movie and the message a lot stronger. But as it is, he does work well as a character that is of a believable, intelligent young child. One that's going to make dumb choices because, well, he's a kid. He hasn't had the experiences that show the consequences of certain behavior, and he lacks the wisdom to make choices and foresee possible problems. Then we have a lot of Jimmy's friends and schoolmates in the movie who have some layers to them for some of them, like Cindy, who seems like a mean girl, but deep down we can see some real jealousy because of how Jimmy's replaced her as smartest kid. But most of the time she's sort of a stereotypical mean girl. But when we do see the more layers to her, when things are looking at their worst, then I can really appreciate her as a character. Sadly, other than Jimmy and Cindy, the other ones aren't as interesting as far as that goes. Sheen and Carl have some good lines, but they feel like the geeky comic reliefs that are often in animated films. Sheen being the kind that obsesses over something, and you definitely knew as a kid, but there's not much to him other than his interest for Ultralord, and Carl is a kind of cute and funny, awkward child who has some problems with asthma. Then there's Libby, Cindy's best friend, and a little sarcastic. Nick is the stereotypical cool kid that gives bad advice, but has some respect towards Jimmy towards the end of the film. Then we have Hugh and Neutron and his wife, Janet, maybe? I didn't watch Jimmy Neutron growing up, so I barely remember any character names other than the ones that are mentioned a lot in the movie. But they're very good parents and they're doing their best, but they also have the problem of having a genius son and not knowing how to encourage him without him causing any damages to other things or getting himself hurt. So they're protective while still having a certain level of encouragement, and while they clearly love their son very much, they also have some conflict going on, so that makes them very believable parents. One of the best characters is probably Goddard. He doesn't say anything, but he's just such a cute young figure, and all his features are really cool. So, he definitely is an interesting character, and he's just so cute. Robot dog. And now on to our villains, King Guba and Ubalar, the Hunkians, and the ones that kidnap all the parents. And they're pretty fun. Patrick Stewart plays King Guba, and he always is great in things from what I've seen, even in animated films like this. So he has a certain level of affableness, but a bit of sarcasm too. And he is an enjoyable villain with some good lines. As well as Ublar. As much as I complain about Martin Short in Treasure Planet, here we have a character that it fits with more, and that fits more into the world. So, they're pretty enjoyable villains. Not exceptionally memorable, or I wouldn't put them on my top list, but they definitely do have some good lines and act as good threats to the characters and tie in nicely with the main arc of the kids. The characters might not be great with some exceptions, but they are decent enough for young kids, which is basically how I would sum up this whole movie. Decent for young kids. I know that some movies that are technically weaker than this, I've given certain positive reviews to because of nostalgia, a Tron Central Park being the obvious one. But at the same time, since I hadn't seen this young, I'm not going to have any nostalgia for it, which is exactly what I said in that review. So don't go saying this is that I've given anime movies that are worse than this kind of reviews, because this is exactly in the category of if you don't see it at a certain age, you're not going to get much enjoyment out of. It's not a bad movie by any means, and it has some good moments, but while it's not terrible by any means, it's average. Completely average. The animation, characters, and story, other than the plot line of the moral of the importance of your parents and listening to them being drummed over your head, all of it is pretty average. So I'd say this would really be good for young kids, maybe some parents around my age or a little older that grew up with the show and want to show it to their young ones, or somehow a fan of the show that never saw the movie, which I can't really picture that, but it is definitely a possibility. But other than that, I would say that there's probably better movies for you to check out. Thanks for watching, and I'd like to thank White again for suggesting this movie. And as always, if you have any anime film you want me to review, please leave it in the comment section below. And got a blast!